Members of Budget and Finance, we will come to order.
I have 9 of those with Anthony Davis unaccounted for.
He's not here. He may be the 10th. Welcome, everyone, to our Budget and Finance meeting. Our first bill is Resolution 2013-905. Councilmember Stein. It approves a state grant of $1,539.61 to the Davidson County Election Commission to purchase a computer, printer, and software. As you recall, we invited our friends from the Election Commission to join us, and I want to briefly invite Chairman Ron Buchanan and Coordinator of Elections Kent Wall to the podium. If you all have some introductory remarks, our meeting and floor are open, and welcome. Now, if you do it right from there.
All right.
Thank you. Welcome. Delighted to have you here. I will say, in preparation for Chairman Buchanan's remarks, we have discovered that Chairman Buchanan has a link to this council. His father served in this body in the middle 60s from the Madison area, and we are delighted to have you here some years later. The floor is yours, Mr. Buchanan.
Thank you. I want to express my appreciation for this opportunity to speak to you. At the November meeting of the Election Commission, we discussed the fact that we needed to develop a closer relationship with the Metro Budget and Finance Committee so that we can understand where you're coming from, and hopefully we can communicate to you where we're coming from. And there's a lot of miscommunication I've found in the 6 months I've been on the job. The first thing is the computer, the 1,500 and change computer. This is something the state has mandated that all 95 counties put into effect. 92 of the 95 counties have already purchased them. It is a grant from the state, so it costs Metro nothing as long as we do it by June. After that date, we have to pay for it ourselves. But this is to transmit secure data to and from the state on voter registration, etc. So that's the reason we're here. Another thing that I would like to just briefly touch on is at the November meeting we discussed early voting sites. And the commission voted to have one early voting site open, and that's at the Sunny West Auditorium in the building where we used to occupy, and it will be open for 14 days. This is not something the commission really wanted to do. We would like to have more early voting sites, but for the May election, it's probably not that economically feasible based upon the number of people vote. But the Election Commission wanted y'all to know that we'll be glad to open more polls if we have the money to do it. In our budget for this year, we had $147,000 earmarked for one early voting site to be open 14 days and 12 early voting sites to be open 7 days. That line item was deleted from our budget. So we don't have the money. Matter of fact, we don't have the money for the one poll site. We're having to shift that from other areas in order to get that done. As another example, there was a problem last year with the software in the electronic poll books. In this year's budget, we have $95,000 allocated for computer software, and that's by contract we have to pay. That was deleted from our budget. So we're under contractual obligation to pay that, and yet the money was deleted, and we're having to find it in other sources, which is really the only discretionary funds we have is to eliminate employees. And then that puts us shorthanded to recruit and train some 1,200 to 1,500 poll workers. So it's sort of a vicious cycle that we're getting into, and we need to develop a better relationship. Also, I wanted to introduce you to Kent Wall. Kent is our new Administrator of Elections, and I know I received a letter from some members of the council questioning our decision there, and we're quite happy to have Kent. He is a West Point graduate. He is a Vietnam veteran. He was an artillery battery commander in Vietnam, so he had frontline experience. He then left there and went into private enterprise and worked his way up to president of Docker Shoes, which had $30 million in annual sales and 4,500 locations. And from there to president of Johnson & Murphy's Shoes, which had $100 million in sales, 100 retail locations, and 900 employees. Ken has come out of retirement to help us sort of reshape the election commission and use his managerial skills and goal-setting skills to do that. At the same time, I share y'all's love and appreciation for Joan Nixon. She is a wonderful person. We really appreciate her work. She served as an interim administrator with great dignity and character, and we appreciate that. It wasn't a matter of having one or the other. With retaining both of them, we've got the best of both worlds in Kent's managerial skills and his experience outside the election, and Joan's experience inside. She's been there 27 years, but that's the only place she's ever worked, is the election commission. So I don't know the other commissioners, but I felt like I wanted a new set of eyes to look at it and see if we can do things better. I want to introduce the other members of the commission that are here. A.J. Starlings, stand up. We have Jennifer Lawson, who's sitting next to him, and Tricia Hertzfeld. So the only other member of the commission, Jim Delanis, has the flu, or he would be here too. We want y'all to know that we value your positions in the community, we value your input, and we want to work hand in hand with y'all. Now, I'll open it to any questions that y'all may have.
For the purpose, the chair was remiss in not getting a motion on 905, and seconded. The floor is now open for discussion. Councilwoman Moore.
Just a quick question, and thank you all for coming today. You're saying that this just involves one computer, one printer, and what is the software that you all are utilizing?
This is Dell software that comes with it. It's part of the system.
Okay. Will our ITS department be involved in installing this?
I'm sure they probably will, but the state has mandated that this be put in place. We'll call on them for whatever assistance we need, but we more than likely can do a large part of it ourselves.
Okay. I was just wondering, I just saw Keith Durbin back there. I was just wondering whether he would be involved in that or not. Thank you so much.
Councilman Garrett.
Mr. Chairman, just one, I wanted to ask, I can't remember which, and Mr. Chairman asked, who sets the how much the poll workers are paid? Do we do that, or does the state do that, John, or do you?
Mr. McCann.
I asked that question today because I was quite curious, and I'm led to believe that we can set that ourselves along with finance approval, of course.
The council appropriates the money. The council appropriates the money for the raises, but they set the amount.
Here again, sometimes I don't remember everything that I should. The legislature, I think, sets a top limit on it, if I'm not, do they?
I'm not sure they may.
But anyway, I guess what I'm getting at, Mr. Chairman, is all the years that I've been doing this, that will be one of your major questions and major problems in your recruitment, is how much you're able to pay those poll workers. I hope this council, and I hope you'll request, and I hope the mayor's office will help in where they can, but they can't recruit, and it's usually senior citizens that are doing that work, and many of those senior citizens are retiring, or are not going to work for what they've been paid over the last few years. And I know as time has gone by, the chairmen of Budget and Finance, along with the administration, have realized that in order for y'all to recruit, they've got to have
Councilman, you are having a senior moment. In the last 2 years, and maybe in last year's budget, we actually appropriated more money. I think
we may need to do it again.
Right.
And if we need to do it again, if we need to do it again, then please come forward with that. But as the time has gone by, that has always been a major problem when it comes to the recruitment.
Thank you. We'll certainly keep that in consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Tiger.
Thank you. And Mr. Buchanan, thanks for being here. I just want to give you a heads up. Based on the comment that you made about the low turnout expected in May, I'm going to drop you a note tomorrow or the next day asking for some data on turnouts of presidential versus state versus local, judges, council. I think that would be good information going back maybe to the formation of Metro, or however easy record keeping you'd have as to percentage of turnout. I notice where other communities are looking to consolidate election cycles to both boost turnout and to save dollars. So that will be the point of my questions that will be coming your way.
Councilman Tigert, I think that's an excellent comment, and that's the type of communication that we need between the Election Commission and the council members, because we have done some preliminary examination of that data, and we would be more than happy to share it with you.
Councilwoman Weiner.
Thank you, Chair. My question is totally off the subject,
Okay.
although it does have to do with the Election Commission. When somebody applies to vote and sends in the card, they provide a phone number. That phone number is then given to candidates when you pick up your voter roll information and you get the spreadsheet or you get the disc or whatever, and it has that phone number on it. If somebody uses a robocall, the phone number that is called has come from that bit of information. Average Joe citizen doesn't understand that. I think everybody needs to be made aware when they're voting that if you provide that phone number is then provided to candidates that are out running, and if they don't want to be called, they shouldn't give that phone number.
Okay.
So that was just kind of an FYI of something we've heard
I appreciate
out there.
that. After 6 months on the job for me and 2 for Kent, I was unaware of that, so we'll look into that.
I learned after about 2 years.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Mitchell.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate y'all coming today. First, you briefly discussed the several council members' question, the new director. I wasn't part of signing that letter, but as you well know, prior to you coming on board, there was a pretty scathing report from the State Election Commission on your predecessors. Probably should have been a Department of Justice investigation on what happened in the Davidson County Election Commission. I just want to make sure, we're not going down the same path we did previously, because maybe the other person applying for that position, the only position they've ever had is in the Election Commission, but that person knows how to run elections quite well and has run elections quite well in Davidson County. So with that just being said, so far, everything you've done has, you seem to be above board. But I'd like to know, of that report, what have you started trying to correct from your predecessors to make sure those things don't happen again?
Okay. Virtually everything. Everything is under review and as to how we're going to do it. The biggest problem that the state report showed was a lack of leadership, and we've corrected that problem. When I accepted my appointment to the commission, my thoughts were, and I was given no directives one way or the other, but my thought was the easiest thing is to rehabilitate the existing administrator, because that's easier than going and finding a replacement, et cetera. It didn't take me long to realize we weren't going to rehabilitate that administrator. His personality is what it was, and we weren't going to change it. So we had to make a change. The other thing is, over the years, in 2008, our budget was $4.2 million or something. We're down less than $3 million now. And nobody has screamed, and I'm here screaming that we need money. That was the two things, leadership and money. We have to recruit and train 12 to 1,500 people. One of the first things Kent did that he brought from his private industry was to have a focus group with the poll workers and ask some of them, what do you want to tell us? And we were inadequately trained. So we're trying to get a person on board that rewrites the training manuals. We want hands-on experience. They gave a slide presentation and told them how to do it, and never let them try to do it. So there's a lot of things we're trying to implement that are all different. The one thing we're trying to do is we don't care who people vote for. It's bipartisan. We're not out there trying to get Democrats or Republicans or anybody else to vote. All we want to do is let anybody vote that's entitled to vote, keep people from voting that aren't entitled to vote, and count the ballots accurately, and treat the people with respect. It's a simple job. So that's what we're trying to accomplish.
Well, and I commend you on that, and like I've always said, we're all partisan until we step into the polling place. Then all bets are off. Everyone's equal footing. And ladies and gentlemen, to go back what Councilman Tigard said, well, yeah, you have between 60 and 70% turnout elections on presidential because a whole lot more money is spent, but we also have a lot more availability of voting, ladies and gentlemen. We have a lot more places for people to vote, and yes, those are important. Federal elections are very important, but these local elections, for the people who sit in these seats, as well as the people who preside as judges in our county, those elections are just as important. And, as I've been before, I can be the biggest critic of the Election Commission, or I could be the biggest proponent. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got the money to spend on a lot of the things we've been spending money on in this council. I think the fundamentals of our democracy and giving people the right to vote and giving these people the amount of money to be able to open up early voting sites for people to have the right to vote is just as important as bridges or stadiums or pieces of land on Foster Avenue. I mean, we need to look at their budget, see what the funding needs are, and make sure they've got enough funding over there to do what they need to run our elections. I think he's coming here today for a cry for help. Now, if they get another scathing report from the State Election Commission in another year, then we'll have another discussion. But right now, I think he's here with hat in hand saying, I don't have enough money to properly run our elections in this county, and I think that should scare everyone in this room.
Okay. Let me expound upon that just a little, Mr. Mitchell. Mr. Riebling we've discussed with him some additional funding, and so he's worked with us on that. This year is sort of going to be a bellwether year, in that we're going to do everything we can to put on a perfect election with what resources we have and with the new management we have. And if we can't do it, then that's going to tell me it's the funding, because I know the management's here.
Well, the problem is a lot of the elections that are on the ballot this May and August aren't going to come back around for the citizens of this county to get to vote again on for 8 years. I think it's an immediate need, and if you don't have enough, if we're going to have one early voting site for this entire county for the judicial elections, that's a problem.
Right.
Councilwoman Langster.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I want to say welcome, and I'm glad to have met both of you gentlemen. But I do understand your call for better trained poll workers. That was a major problem election day, and I'm glad to hear that you're on top of it and moving to make an improvement in that area. That was very good. And I want to say that we're here to help. Just holler. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're on 905. Seeing no further discussion, those in favor of 905 say aye. Opposed, no. 905 is recommended. Thank you all very much for joining us.
Thank you.
929, Council Members Gilmore, Stein, and Hunt approves an extension of a lease agreement between Metro Government and Union Station Hotel. Moved and seconded. Is there discussion? See none, those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. 929 is recommended. 930, Councilmember Stein appropriates $4,736,300 as a supplemental appropriation from various undesignated fund balances to Metro Nashville Public Schools, the Police Department, and the General Operating Fund. May I have a motion? Moved and seconded. Just as a reminder to the council, $4.3 million of this goes to the school system for their early buyout program, $336,000 to the police department, and $100,000 for the study and formulating committee. Councilman Garrett, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to, Chris, if you'll just give me the heads up and say that the school system is okay with this, you feel good about this, and this leaves you with a sufficient percentage in your balance, just so that you can say it for the public.
Mr. Henson, you're recognized.
Thank you. Yes, sir, Councilman Garrett. The school board did approve this retirement incentive at a regularly scheduled meeting, and we feel like it's something good to do and will help us in future budget years, and we do have adequate undesignated fund balance to cover the costs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Mitchell.
Yeah, I think there's been talks other than just, for the retiree portion of this. Aren't some other needs there for more computers for testing and other things that the state has mandated during the reforms? And a lot of we have a lot of people here in the city who are for all these reforms, and it's their money at the school system, and word on the street is that, it's not part of this because it wouldn't pass. Are there additional needs for computers for state mandated testing that the school system has currently?
There are additional needs that were originally a part of the request for use of fund balance. We have since decided not to pursue that out of fund balance, but to pursue it looking at other budget revisions that can be made on a smaller scale. It would involve, as you said, computing devices for student use, training for teachers on the new Common Core Park online assessments, etc. And so we'll be continuing to use this year's budget as well as looking at next year's budget to try to meet those needs.
Well, yeah, the bottom line of this, colleagues, is the state is requiring all of this new testing, and children don't have computers to practice on to do these tests. They're time tests, and they're required to do it on computers now. Well, the child may know the answer to the question on the screen, but it may be the first time the child's ever sat in front of a keyboard ever. So we're going to have a lot of our schools could get failing scores and go into the achievement school district. Well, we all know if you go into the achievement school district, what that qualifies our district for. It qualifies us for more charter schools, ladies and gentlemen. So we're not going to give our school system the needs that they have for these children to achieve on these tests that we're requiring now by the state for them to take. The school system has the money to buy these computers. It will keep their fund balance. I think they're required to keep above 5% fund balance. If we spend the money to get these computers, they'll still be at 6% above what is required, and our children will get the computers they need to be able to take these tests. So I think we need to look long and hard as a body that we need to provide the school system with what they need for our children to achieve, because the rigorous standards that are being set forth and being pushed down upon us from the state are requiring this, but we're not going to give our school systems the tools to succeed. I have a problem with that, especially when it's their money in their fund balance, and it's going to keep it above the minimum that they're required to have in the fund balance. So we need to address this quickly, because, we're going to hear all these reports, our failing schools in Davidson County. Well, they've come here, they need the help, they have the money, it's their money. Let's give them the tools they need to succeed, and our children the tools they need to succeed in Davidson County, so we don't hear of another failing school in our county. So in the current weeks, we need to address this problem.
Further discussion on 930. Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. 930 will be recommended. Thank you, Chris. 931 appropriates $9,031,500 from the General Fund Reserve Fund to purchase new and replacement equipment for 9 departments. Motion? Moved and seconded. This is 4%. There are a lot of folks here. Councilman Tigert, you going to go down the line?
No, I've got some selected questions here.
We see who's the lucky folks are back there. They're all weighted with bated breath.
General Services, only because that's second in the...
Ms. Whittemore, come on down. Did we want them to line up, Charlie?
No, these are the...
Nancy Whittemore with General Services.
Thanks for being here, Nancy. The Parkway Towers transfer, is that, explain to me the $724,000.
Okay, we are unloading the 222 building and moving Human Resources, Internal Audit over to Parkway Towers. Human Relations, because of the one-stop shop at Metro Office Building, will be moving there. And then we're doing some upgrades for JIS and for the Public Defender.
Are we contracting this movement, the movement of furniture and tables and desks and whatnot, or are we using sources within the government?
We're contracting that. Now, not all of this is for FF&E. Some of this is IT, and Keith can speak to that, but about $300,000 of it is for the infrastructure and IT needs.
All right, so I'm going to focus in on the furniture, fixture, and equipment. Is this not something that Sheriff's Department labor could do cheaper and hopefully just as well with correct supervision?
Well, it's my understanding that the Sheriff's Department at this time, they have a limited number of prisoners available to do work. So in scheduling this, I know in some of the other areas where we use them, they have not been available for the labor that we've needed.
If there was enough labor and enough lead time where they could set aside that labor, would they be a suitable source to do so?
On some things they would be, yes.
I would just encourage in the future these type of moves, to line that up. And I guess, Keith, if you'll come forward, following up with what Nancy said, I would just encourage Nancy that, and don't go far, I think you've hit the list down here a second time in a minute, that the Sheriff's Office, if you've given enough time and resources, does a pretty good job with the right supervision. So
we use the Sheriff's Office in many areas, but I'll certainly explore that as we look at moves. Okay.
And Keith, Nancy talked about relocating the equipment and whatnot.
Yes, sir.
Your department will supervise all that and the rewiring or wherever it's going.
That is exactly right.
Okay. What is an end-of-life server and network?
So all of our equipment has a certain lifespan, and we're managing servers that accommodate about 8,000 users across Metro government. We track each of those servers over a 3 to 5 year period, and as it reaches the end of life, we replace it. The individual departments buy systems, and they buy that initial equipment, then that's transferred to us to maintain and make sure it's kept up to date.
Okay.
So that is an end of life.
All right, so it doesn't have anything, it's just that it's at the tail end of its useful life. It's
Absolutely
okay,
correct.
I was not familiar with that, the way you were using it there. One of the questions, and I'm going to address this to either Mr. Riebling or someone from the administration, but one of the questions you're asked, is this equipment absolutely necessary at this time? And certainly you said yes on this end-of-life type equipment. Rich, does any department have ever answered no, that it's not absolutely necessary?
Let's just say that they have a lot more on the list than they're getting funded for. So we try to prioritize, make them prioritize, so that the greatest need gets funded first. And I think in most cases, departments cooperate very well on that.
Sure. I was just curious if anybody had fouled up and answered, no, it's not necessary, we'd like to have it.
Just like no department's ever said they would turn down more money. I don't believe anybody would turn this down.
Sure. Okay, and my final question, this is for Parks Department and General Services.
Come on down, Mr. Lynch.
Welcome, Tommy. New equipment for the Sportsplex, and I'm assuming this is exercise equipment, or what type of equipment is it?
It's fitness equipment. We're in the process of building a fitness center, a new addition at the Sportsplex right now.
There was a fitness center there before. Are we expanding it?
We are actually building a new one across the parking lot from the ice rink and the aquatic center. The fitness center that was in the old aquatic center was sort of jammed into an exercise room, and with the developments around Centennial Park and with the amount of people that are in Metro that use our facilities, we needed a bigger facility.
Sure. Nancy, following up on Tommy's needs there, obviously I've had some fun with you in the past at the Howard School Fitness Complex that I think is way over machined for the usage that it gets. Do we ever go back and study where equipment goes at police precincts, fire halls, Metro buildings, and say, hey, we've got 15 machines there, but we could get by with only 10, and 5 of them could go to the Parks Department?
The fitness centers that you're referring to are fairly new, so we have not gone back and evaluated those recently. And I guess, during the daytime, the equipment may not be used till the full capacity, but in mornings and afternoons, when people are not working, or during lunchtime, we do have people using the fitness centers.
Could you provide us some of those counts? I mean, I hate to beat a dead horse at Howard School, but, the 20 plus pieces of equipment, the first year when you provided the records to me, there were never more than 30 people in a given 24-hour period. So it was almost as if all 30 of them would have to come at the same time to use every piece of equipment. It just seemed like there was excess equipment at that particular location.
I'll be happy to provide that.
Do we have usage figures? Do you manage the police precincts and the fire halls too?
We do manage that, but we manage the facility, but we don't, I don't have usage figures of their fitness room.
Do they scan in to go into that room?
Don't think so, but I can check and see.
Well, if you would check on that, the ones that you have control over, and then maybe on my behalf send out a note to the commanders and chiefs at the different stations and just ask, the question is the equipment you have adequate, too much, too little? Can you use more? Can you use less? I'd be curious as to whether some of those are overstocked.
Okay, I'll be happy to.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Lanster.
Yes, I wanted to ask Mr. Lynch if you would be involved in helping the Election Commission get their new pieces of equipment we just approved. Keith Durbin, I'm sorry, not Mr. Lynch.
They look a lot alike.
Yeah. I don't think. Will you be involved in helping the Election Commission? I don't think they recognized your name when it was mentioned in your department.
I haven't had the honor of meeting the new commissioner, but we would be happy to be involved. We actually would very much like to be, since it sounds like it is a machine that has some sensitivity around it.
Okay. I hope you will hold out your hand and make that offer.
I will reach out to them.
Thank you.
Keep in mind, that's just one computer they're getting with that grant. It's
Yes.
one single PC.
One PC.
Councilman Bedney.
Keith?
Oh, Keith, you're more popular than Ms. Whitmore.
Is that server part of the redundancy, and what will happen if that server fails?
Which specifics, sir?
The ones that you're asking for money to replace.
We have a schedule, and so we're probably talking about 35 or 40 separate servers out of the 600 or 700 that we maintain. So I can't pinpoint for you at this exact moment which ones, but we build a plan around each server we replace to minimize any kind of outage.
But that's part of the redundancy, right? You don't want to not be able to print checks for the city employees and things of that sort.
Absolutely. Some of them are for redundancy purposes, other are the primary servers that are used for systems.
Thanks. Another question. You and I talk about codes and making codes information available. I also talked to the codes person. Yeah, and I was wondering if we can, and perhaps the question should be for him, but if there is any way to deliver code applications, permit applications that are coming through codes to all the different council members that are interested in getting that information as a temporary patch until the new system comes online. I was wondering if you and I can work on creating some way of delivering information to us.
I'd be happy to work with you. I know that we are about a year away from our CityWorks implementation, and I know Terry's very concentrated on making sure that happens. We're working very, very closely with him on that. But together, you and I'm happy to meet with him and you and to see what we can do in the interim.
Yeah, some temporary solution, so when somebody calls me, what are they building in the corner of something and something, I can tell them what it is. Thank you.
Happy to.
Councilman Mitchell.
Yeah, just piggyback on top of what Councilman Tigard said earlier. We've just built a new community center in Joelton with a fitness room, and it doesn't have any equipment in it. So if we've got other places within the city, Director Whittemore, if we can move some equipment around to supply that new facility with equipment, or if we've got old equipment that is being put out of service, maybe Director Lynch can help us.
We opened it without the equipment being there. We've got equipment on order that is going to be there. And just for your information, as we start doing this equipment that's coming into the Sportsplex, and I'll just use your example or your district, the fitness equipment that's in the Bellevue Community Center had come from the previous equipment that had been 2 times before at the Sportsplex. So it's one of our things that we do use is reuse the equipment as it goes from the fee-based places to the community center. But as we open each new community center, we're getting new equipment for each one. We just did not have it. We didn't have a definite opening date for that community center, and we got delayed and we couldn't store the equipment. So we have equipment on order that's coming there.
Hey, I appreciate that. I just knew some folks in the community had approached me about trying to raise money to get some. So if you've got it,
initially there was going to be a donation, and then the donation of the equipment took up more space than we had, and so we ended up having to get some purchased ourselves.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Back on then 931 as moved. Those in favor of 931 say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. 931 is recommended. 932, Councilmember Stein, Pardue, and Lancaster approves a state grant of $211,357 to the Mayor's Office of Emergency Management for Homeland Security Preparedness Activities. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. 932 is recommended. 933, Councilmember Stein, Pardue, and Lancaster approves a state grant of $399,089.55 to the Metro Police Department for enhanced DUI enforcement patrols. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Councilman Pardue, are you on this one? I'm sorry.
Well, I was on the 4% fund, Ron.
I apologize. I'm sorry.
I've been skipped before.
But not intentionally, ever by me.
Okay. I just had a question. Is the fire department involved in getting some equipment money from the 4% fund?
They are.
Thank you.
They are getting $1,160,000 for replacement cardiac monitors and defibrillators in this 4% resolution.
No trucks or nothing?
I don't think you can do a truck in the
There were no vehicles.
You can't do, no vehicles in this one. I think Mr. Riebling's working on that, however. Councilman Tigard, are you on
Yeah, I just wanted to, if Councilman Pardue has these problems at home, there are folks back there from the hospital authority that would be able to counsel and help him.
Thank you. Back on 30. No, we're not. We're on 33. Back on 933. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. 933 is recommended. 934, Councilmembers Stein, Pardue, and Lancaster approves the renewal of an intergovernmental agreement between Tennessee State University and the Metro Police Department for extra duty police services. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. 934 is recommended. 935, Councilmembers Stein and Pardue approves an application for a state grant of $110,000 to the Metro Police Department to fund a pilot program to assist victims from high-crime areas. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. It is recommended. 936, Councilman Stein approves an intergovernmental agreement between the Federal Bureau of Investigation and Metro for participation in the Child Exploitation Task Force. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. 936 is recommended. 937, Councilman Stein approves an agreement between the U.S. Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives and the Metro Police Department for reimbursement of overtime salary costs and other related costs. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. 937 is recommended. 939, Councilmembers Stein and Maynard approves an agreement between Metro Board of Health and TriStar Summit Medical to provide a worksite POD for medical professionals to distribute antibiotics, vaccines, and antivirals in the event of a public health emergency. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. 939 is recommended. Yes, ma'am.
Attorney Cooper, do I need to abstain from this legislation?
No.
Thank you.
940, Councilmember Stein and Maynard approves a contract between the state and the Metro Board of Health for employee tuberculosis exposure testing services. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. 940 is recommended. 942, Councilmembers Bennett, Stein, and Dominy approves an application for a transportation enhancement program grant of $1,481,804 from the State Department of Transportation to Metro Public Works for construction of sidewalks along Hart Lane. It's moved and seconded. Councilman Lancaster, are you on this one?
Yes.
Do you want to be recognized, Councilman?
No, my light is not on.
Okay. I'm sorry. Any other discussion on 942? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. 942 is recommended. 943, Councilmembers Hunt, Stein, and Dominy approves an intergovernmental agreement between the state and Metro Public Works for safety improvements at the intersection of Brick Church Pike and Chesapeake Drive. I have a motion and it's seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. 943 is recommended. 945, Councilman Stein authorizes the Department of Law to settle the personal injury claims of Ana Mora Munoz, Christine Garcia, and Ruben Garcia Arriago against Metro government for a total amount of $19,000. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. 945 is recommended. This moves us to bills on second reading. 2013-605, Councilmember Stein amends the Metro Code to lower the minimum fee limousine livery services must charge and to allow the use of internet-based technology to pre-arrange livery service. Sponsor Mr. Cooper, would you just briefly outline what this does?
This ordinance makes two primary changes to the livery ordinance. It reduces the minimum fee that livery services must charge from $45 down to roughly $9, or 3 times the minimum rate or the rate to turn on a cab meter. So that's the first change. The second change is it would allow internet-based applications to be used for the prearrangement of livery services.
Thank you. And we have here in the course of discussion, if we have questions, we have folks here for both the CVB and actually from Uber are here. Councilwoman Berry.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, this actually might be, is Mr. Fields here?
He is.
Oh, great.
Hi.
Hi, Billy. These questions actually might be...
And the Transportation Licensing Board is represented here.
Great, thank you. Well, I know that this ordinance is, as described by Mr. Cooper, to just change some of the fee base. I actually have some additional questions about what this means for other delivery models that are going to come in and how they compare to taxi cabs. So if you don't mind indulging me for just a few minutes to ask Billy a couple of these questions.
That's fine, but
Thank you.
I just want you to know, this only applies to Uber. I mean, it doesn't apply to those that aren't regulated.
Right, and that's what I want to understand on the regulated, the ones that are, how far does that regulation go? So, Billy, would Uber actually be regulated in the following ways like the taxi companies? Would they have to carry the same kind of commercial insurance that cabs do?
Uber is a piece of software that's on a smartphone. Uber will not be licensed in Davidson County. The Uber model works with only licensed sedan companies that are in existence today. So anybody that, if you come to Nashville and you have Uber, you press the button, you're going to be getting a licensed vehicle that we have inspected and the driver that we have also approved. So these are all licensed companies. There's no public safety compromised at all in this case.
You're going exactly where I wanted you to go. So the drivers are screened. It's just like any other delivery model that we're using. It's actually regulated.
Absolutely.
That was my question. Thank you.
Councilman Garrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know this is your bill, but would you at least ask those individuals who are here representing Uber and those to at least stand up so that the council members can see who's here and whether anybody wants to recognize anybody or you, Mr. Chairman, want to recognize anybody so that they'll know that who they are and I know there's lobbyists with them and all that type of thing too, but at least they're here.
They are recognized. Mr. Kentz, who represents Uber, is here. He is also joined by one of our local football superstars, Mr. Delaney Walker, has joined him. And I apologize, I don't know who else is with you.
Hi, Kimberly Marshall.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councilman Claiborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to ask Mr. Fields some additional questions along the line that Council Lady Berry was asking to be more specific. And this is primarily for the benefit of those who might be watching this or those who will watch the rerun are interested. Number of, especially the cab drivers and some of the black car, you said that all the cars would be inspected. All the cars that are using Uber would have the same inspection that all other current permitted cars are.
This portion of the ordinance refers directly to the other passenger vehicles for hire. Under that ordinance, anybody that's operating a limousine company, which could include shuttles, black cars, SUVs and that sort of thing, they're all licensed and regulated. It's my understanding the way Uber works, this particular program of Uber that y'all are referring to would only be using cars that are licensed by the city already.
Okay, and so those drivers will have background checks the way all existing drivers are. They will be drug tested, random drug tests will be...
The law does not allow random drug testing. That's actually something I'm working on to probably bring to you later. But
we don't have that now.
But we do have, when they apply for a permit, they are drug tested.
Okay, so all of these drivers will go through the same orientation program that you require of existing drivers?
Each passenger vehicle for hire company currently is required to have their own orientation program. The taxi cab drivers have a 3-day program. The Taxi Pro program that we have in place today, when the ordinance was written for the other passenger vehicles for hire, you allowed the companies to provide their own training for that.
Okay, so all of these cars that use this application then will, they'll be subject to the Transportation Licensing Commission in all aspects that other cabs and limos are currently Is that correct?
Yes, sir. According, the vehicles that we're talking about in this particular situation, again, are all licensed, and the rules that this commission, that this council passed is what we'll be enforcing and regulating.
Okay, and so I would like to ask the gentleman that's here representing Uber, and again, I'm asking this basically for broader
This is Mr.
information
Justin
here.
Kentz.
Right. So do you agree with everything that Mr. Fields has just said about the folks who will be using your application?
Yes, that's right, council member. In fact, it's not as though we're bringing in any new drivers or any new vehicles. In fact, we're just partnering with locally already existing transportation companies or any local companies that may start and that are regulated, licensed, and insured in accordance with what Mr. Fields said.
Okay. So I'm just asking these because there's a great concern among some of the existing drivers over, you have another thing called UberX.
Yes, that's correct.
And then we got the, what is it called with the pink mustache? Lyft, okay. So and again to Mr. Fields, we don't currently, as I understand it, have any regulations that can relate to these. Where are we with that?
Where are we at this particular point is pretty straightforward. We have met on one occasion. I've met with one occasion with representatives from Lyft, for instance, and we've been discussing it. Because the model is so different than anything we have in terms of the way they operate, what we're doing is gathering information from them. In fact, I'm expecting more information to be able to determine exactly if they fit into the model, into our regulations as we have today. We're working with Metro Legal just to make sure that we're doing what we need to do. I think it'd be inappropriate for us to jump too fast till we knew exactly what we were doing. Once we know what we're doing, if they're subject to regulation, we will. If something needs to be modified and the commission feels like it should be, we'd certainly come to the council to discuss it.
Okay, so we now still have on the streets what some have characterized as gypsy cabs, right?
We do have illegal taxi cabs that are operating in Davidson.
So with your limited personnel, you do as much as you can to deal with those folks when they're found or when issues come up. Is that?
Yes, so they are subject to citation in front of the environmental court in Davidson County. Well, again, it's a challenge to catch them because in order to catch them, we have to catch them operating. I've personally stopped them in various events and gone to them, and the passengers they had in the car were coming from other counties, so they weren't subject to our commission's regulation at that moment.
Okay, so with these other two entities that we've just discussed, will you kind of, to the extent possible, look at them in the same way as the gypsy cabs?
Anybody that's operating in Davidson County outside our ordinance, we're going to be looking at. We certainly, public safety is what we look at as our primary goal every day. And we want to make sure that anybody that's in any vehicle in Davidson County that's within our authority is regulated.
Okay, so anybody that's listening to this that has an interest in this particular issue, you're saying to them that we're moving at a pace, a measured pace, to get to the place where we can at least address these other two, what do you call them, opportunities or services or whatever?
We'd probably call them ride-sharing programs. Yeah. And yes, I think we're moving. I think we're moving deliberately ahead. By the same token, I think if we move, we don't want to make a lot of mistakes. We'd like to do it if we're going to take action. We want to make sure we do it right.
Okay. Okay. Thank both of you.
Councilwoman Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure which of you two should answer this one, but I understand there's still a little bit of difficulty or it's more difficult to get a cab out in neighborhoods or away from downtown or the airport area. Will this help address that problem? Maybe both of you should answer that.
What I can tell you is we have 755 licensed cabs in Davidson County at the present time, probably an additional 35 or 40 ADA compliant wheelchair taxis. So we have approximately 800 taxis in Davidson County. We work with each of the companies to ensure service countywide. In fact, they're required to do that. But when they aren't available, obviously we can't hold them to provide a service if they don't have enough vehicles or they can't get there quick enough. So from our perspective, we're going to continue to work to make sure that your neighborhood, for instance, gets taxi cabs. And what I would tell the public, if they're having problems, we'd certainly like to know that, especially if anybody was refused service.
Councilwoman Gilmore.
Thank
Thank you, Councilman Stein. I just would like to hear more about why the fare has been changed. I remember there was a lot of lobbying that year in 2010 when we made it $45. They talked about how important it was, and now we're reducing it, and I just want to know what has changed. And then additionally, the second question would be, will it always be for this particular Uber that they can only service those persons that are using the internet, or will they, well, I guess if it's technology, never mind that question, it would be for the Lyft. But just if you could answer the $45 piece, I would appreciate that.
Typically, the way, Council Lady, that we separate taxi cabs and any other vehicle is through various kinds of regulations. This particular case, the way we differentiate between, say, a sedan and a taxi cab is a flat rate. By requiring a minimum rate for the limousines, it makes them different. Today, if you were to get in a taxi cab, it's going to cost you $3. That's the flag drop, and then you're going to pay an additional $2 per mile. In a sedan, for instance, if you were to make this change, it's going to start at $9. That's the least they're going to be able to charge. And I'm certain, and again, I don't work for Uber, so I can't answer that particular question or any of the other services, but what I can tell you is I'm confident that rate's going to go up just like it would in anything else. So the longer you're in that vehicle, you'd be paying more. So the truth of the matter is, around the country, there are many ways and many manners in which this differentiation is made. In the cities where they have minimum rates, some are higher, some are lower, some have no minimum rates at all. So the fact that we continue to have a minimum rate means there's going to be a difference between the two.
Councilman Mitchell.
Yeah, Mr. Phillip, along the same lines, has the Tennessee Livery Association weighed in on this?
I've not met with them.
Okay, because I think, as Council Lady Gilmore said, it's been, I guess, around 2 years since we put in the regulations regulating the industry, and as she stated, it was very important for that minimum to differentiate between, cabs and limos. And in fact, I think, whether we go to the U.S. Court of Appeals fighting to keep that in place, I think we probably spent several $100,000 as a city fighting to keep that in place. My question goes back to what Council Lady Gilmore just asked. What has changed? We based the regulations of several other similar sized cities, in our region and across the country to regulate this industry. And, we're regulating the people who are already currently here doing business, and the people in our city, employing people in our city. And now all of a sudden we're changing our model and changing their business model, the people who are doing business here. Why?
I wasn't here when the original legislation came forward, so I can't speak to that. I was in federal court. We were actually sued in district court. We did not bring the challenge. We were actually challenged. So when we went to court, we defended the law. What I can tell you, what we said in federal court over a 3.5-day period is that we thought it was very appropriate for us to have a differentiation. Some of the testimony that came forward for folks that were called as a part of the conversation was that the dollar figure itself was not nearly as important as having a flat rate, and that was the differentiation. Again, in the industry, that's what it's really all about, is making sure they're treated differently. The fact that you can't walk to a street and pick up a black car and wave a hand as you can in some cities and do a street hail is also different. That's another part of this. Again, I just want to go back to what I've said before. What we're about and what the Commission's about is about the public safety, and that's what we're going to continue to focus our attention on. Whether you agree to raise the rate or not, that's going to be clearly up to you. But from our position, public safety is not compromised.
The federal court, has sided with our law that it was correct, and similar cities have been sued as well, and the same results. What we're doing here is we're hurting local businesses with this, is what we're doing. You're changing their mode, their business model out of the blue. And they've got to change their business model to be able to compete if we pass this with people who are willing to cut corners. So, I mean, that's where we're at, ladies and gentlemen. You know, you may want to talk to some of your local businesses and people who employ people in your district and see where they're at. But, you know, we're changing this model on them abruptly.
Councilman Bedney.
Thank you, Chair. Billy, this was before your time, well, before your last time. But I remember meeting with the prior chair, commissioner, and he was telling us that they couldn't issue any more taxi licenses because they will engage in criminal activity. I mean, there was this whole idea that too many cabs out there will be a bad thing. However, now we are bringing in this competition into the market. Why can we finally give these companies, locally owned, driver-owned companies, the licenses they want so they can actually provide the services that apparently we need?
One of the conversations that you and I had actually when I was assigned to this position in July of 2012 was the number of taxi cabs in the city. At the time there were 585, and it became abundantly clear to me in conversations with you and others that we needed to make sure there were more cabs available in the city. Since then, 2 driver-owned companies have been licensed by the city. One has 45 and the other one has 35, I believe. We also put on a company that is a green company. In fact, they're called Green Cab, and they have 25 taxi cabs that use alternative fuel. And then we also have another company that was put on. So we put on additional taxi cabs at that point, plus some of the existing companies had them. We've just finished last week. Commission authorized us to accept applications for new companies and additional permits that would be heard at the January 23rd meeting of the commission. We closed those on Friday. There are 3 new companies that have made application, as well as 7 of the existing companies, I think, that have made application for additional permits. If we were to agree to all of them, there'd actually be about 830 additional taxi cabs if they were to all be approved. I do not expect them all to be approved because that would more than double the fleet that we have. But I do anticipate the commission having a very interesting meeting in January and a very broad discussion of the number of taxi cabs in the city.
Thank you. So these driver-owned companies are going to be able to get all the cabs they want. I believe some of them wanted to have 80 extra vehicles. And
what they've done, each one of them made application. In that application, they have to explain to the commission, as the ordinance requires, is why there's an additional need. Not a need for them as a company, but why is there an additional need in the city for additional taxi cabs? So what they're burdened to do to the commission in January will be to come forward and say, these are places that we are not able to serve, or this is a reason why we need to serve more, or this is why we're better equipped because we have these needs in the city. So in order to have more taxi cabs, the ordinance requires them to prove there's a need. There's been a lot of publicity, and there's some other folks in the room that could probably talk about that if you wanted to talk about taxi cabs. That shows the great needs. I know that on January the 3rd, we're going to see the biggest convention the city's ever had come into the Music City Center, and we're working as hard as we can to make sure that when people come to Nashville, they're moved as quickly and expeditiously to every site they need to go.
so if this Uber application is approved, how will that impact the cab drivers?
Councilman, it's not an application. It's an authorization. They don't have their own cars.
All right.
It's authorization from this body to allow the technology to be used to hire existing authorized legal vehicles in the county.
Thank you, Chair. So will they be able to use the application to engage to hire cab taxis?
There are certain applications. In fact, some of the cab companies are, I think at least one of the cab companies currently uses a software program. There are software programs available that allows you to, one for instance called Halo, that allows you to use a smartphone to summon a taxi cab. So yes, that would be available. Again, Uber does not own any taxi cab. I mean, any limousines, any shuttles, anything. They're simply an application. They would use existing companies. it's something we're going to have to study. The world's changing. When many of these ordinances when we wrote the taxi cab ordinance, when I had this job the first time in the year 2000, the internet was barely being used. We certainly didn't have any smartphones. It's for Nashville to continue to be the thriving and exciting city that we have to embrace technology and move forward. We certainly don't want to hurt anybody at all, but we're going to have to find ways to work with the world as it is rather than the world as it was.
I understand, but we are saying that we are going to lower how much it costs to hail one of these vehicles by using this application, right?
Lowering the minimum.
Yeah, those are actually two separate things in the ordinance. The $45 fee is different from this other provision authorizing the use of internet-based technology.
So we're basically saying that there is a need for a more affordable transportation in Nashville, which is what a taxi will do.
Well, I guess you're asking a sponsor. I'm saying that I'm sponsoring this because the $45 is proven to be too high, and that this is a more reasonable minimum than the $45, which was appropriate when we did it.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And what I'm saying is, wouldn't that make the case for them issuing more taxi licenses? That's what I'm saying.
They can, and you need to express that to them. And then in January, if you go to their meeting, you can lobby for those then. But that's not part of this legislation.
Well, I apologize, Chair. Thank you.
Any further discussion on 605? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. 605 is recommended. Mr. Tiger.
There is another individual here of notoriety that is attending that had interest in this bill, but either you or Councilman Holloman may want to introduce Nashville's version of Clark Griswold.
I think what Councilman Tiger is referring to is that our friend and colleague Terry Clement is the winner of the Ann Chapman Christmas Yard Lighting Award for this year, and his home on Central Avenue. I would encourage everyone to drive by and see it. Councilman Holloman and I had the honor of presenting that award to them on Saturday night. 2013-606, Councilman Stein authorizes the Metro Arts Commission to accept donations and sponsorships to help cover the costs associated with the 2014 Americans for the Arts Convention. I have a motion and a second. Is there discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Thank you, Ms. Cole, for being here. 608, Council Members Harrison, Stein, and others, authorizes the acquisition of right-of-way drainage and temporary construction easements for a portion of 25 parcels located along Baptist World Center Drive in Haynes-Meade Circle. Have a motion and a second. Is there discussion?
That's what I'm asking.
Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. 608 will be recommended. 609, Council Members Allen, Stein, and others, authorizes the acquisition of right-of-way drainage and temporary construction easements for a portion of 14 parcels located along Chesterfield Avenue and Blair Boulevard for a sidewalk project. A motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. 609 is recommended. 947, a memorializing resolution. Councilman Tigert requests the Davidson County delegation of the Tennessee General Assembly to introduce and support the necessary legislation to allow Metro to charge a ticket tax for events at the new minor league ballpark to be constructed at the Sulphurdale site. Councilman Tigert.
Move approval.
Moved and seconded. Is there, Councilman Tigert, do you wish to be recognized?
Not unless there's some questions.
Okay. Are there questions on this memorializing resolution? Seeing none, those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Thank you. We stand adjourned.